Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to another edition of Gritos de Ghettolandia. I'm here today with Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens. She is the Charles and Linda Wilson Professor in History of Medicine, the Director of the Humanities in Medicine program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, the Director of the program in African American History at the Library Company of Philadelphia, and the Vice President of the Berkshire Conference of Women Historians from 2020 to 2023. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about the commodification of the Black female form in our capitalist, sexist, racist society. Black women have been exploited since the induction of this country as a means to make money, and that is just as true today as when the United States first started. So I introduced Dr. Cooper Owens to give her a platform and so she can share some of this knowledge with us about how this started and how it's still going down today. Dr. Cooper?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I was smiling because I'm like, that's a heavy topic to discuss bright and early in the morning, but it's one that has been ongoing ever since we have had Europeans to write and describe their travels to quote unquote exotic places, right? And even the ways in which that knowledge production has come across in labeling, and I should say mislabeling, Black and brown bodies, when they went to Asia, mislabeling Asian women in really monstrous ways. And now we see really destructive ways. Patriarchy doesn't help anybody in terms of real liberation because it's hierarchical, but at the same time, for Black women, it seems enduring for centuries, with a kind of unchanging narrative. And that's really disappointing.
So initially when we were brought here, we were brought as property, and the more of us that existed, the more beneficial to our owners. And so can you speak a little bit to that role of the Black woman as a fountain of wealth?
Yeah, slavery was an economic labor institution. So when you are, if you are someone invested and individuals were invested, towns were invested, so there was joint stock ownership. Oftentimes we kind of point to one or two people, but we forget this was a collective effort by many people in Western Europe and Central Europe. And so here you have these people invested in an economic labor system. And originally you just bring whoever can work, right? So if it's a healthy man, healthy boy, healthy woman or girl, you bring them over. And you don't expect these folk to form families. You don't expect that the ways in which white people are defining gender roles are really going to change, because these are just workers, right, for the people who own them. And then something happens. Once these white men see that the economic labor system of slavery is really beneficial, all of a sudden their rules no longer apply to the outcomes of slavery. So what does that mean? What it means is, in the British Empire, and this had gone on for over a millennia, based on ancient Greek laws, if a man impregnates a woman, the woman in a quote unquote, respectable or reputable relationship, the child inherits the condition of the father. Had always been that way. All of a sudden they see in slavery that with these Black women who are having children by their owners, because they're being raped, they're being assaulted, because the children now can claim, or the mothers can clearly show that this child is the child of my owner or the child of the overseer. That means that you are losing an economic asset when you can't claim that child as property. And so they changed everything. Didn't matter if Black people became Christian, converted to Christianity. Didn't matter if a white man impregnated a Black woman and was free. All of a sudden you change a law, you call it partu sequitur ventrum in the colonial era, and you say, guess what? If a Black woman is enslaved and has a child, it doesn't matter who the father is, right? that child inherits bondage. That child is a quote unquote servant for life, according to the language of the day. And so it literally changes the face of this new form of slavery, because that had not been done before. And all of a sudden in colonial British America, you now have these new rules. And this literally continues on until slavery is made illegal in 1865. So for centuries, this becomes the rule. And so now there is an investment in trying to maintain Black women's reproductive health so that they can continue the wealth of these men who own them.
And so I think that leads us into a little bit about how, yeah, we're female. Black women are treated as female, as having the female reproductive organs.
Right.
Not necessarily human in some ways, and definitely not women in our society. Definitely not worthy of the care, the gentility, and the protection that women tend to be afforded a little bit in patriarchal societies. That concept of the woman being softer and therefore needing to be protected by men. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Oh yeah, in my classes, when I have taught U.S. History Survey classes, and I have them look at archival sources, because for me, it becomes really important, because nowadays, you know, there are all of these so-called insults where they're like, these professors are, you know, indoctrinating our students to be unpatriotic and they're leftist, this and that. And so for me, I'm like, you know what, let me take you to the original source. I didn't write it. It's not creative nonfiction. Like, I want you to see what these British colonial lawmakers, what they wrote. And what is really interesting, Robert Beverley, he was British born, becomes a lawmaker in Virginia during the colonial era. He writes this treatise, essentially a collection of laws, but also descriptions for whites in England who are thinking about, do I leave my home and everything I know, come to this place where I hear the Indians are savages and they treat white folk as, you know, like slaves. So there's no real difference between indentured servitude and slavery. So white people in England are a little afraid to come. Robert Beverley writes of Negroes and servants. And it literally becomes a defining moment where he talks about gendered labor. And it is against colonial law in Virginia for white women to till the ground. The only folk who are supposed to till the ground are enslaved men or enslaved indentured servants, white men who were indentured servants or farmers, and Black women who would perform the same work, right, as indentured servants or slaves. And they also make this distinction that the Negro is a slave for life. So it's really one of the first times you see, oh wait, oh snap, it's illegal for a good white woman to perform work. But Black women literally are doing the same kind of work as white men and Black men. And in fact, if you become free, we'll penalize you and we'll make you, they call that tithable labor, we'll make you pay a tax for not being a servant or a slave. And so it is literally like in the marrow of this country's legal DNA, where the laws have been discriminatory against Black people, but in particular with that gendered piece, Black women, for centuries, right? For centuries. And my students are just like, I can't believe this happened. I'm like, yeah, 1705. And he didn't just make this up. This is something that had been discussed. And so you start to see the exceptional way, as you stated, that Black women are not accorded any of the quote unquote protections of white womanhood.
So yeah, you blew my mind a little bit too, because I had no idea about this. So essentially what you're saying is that as a Black woman, if somehow you were able to be free within the United States, you had to pay a tax in order to have basically the comforts of being female.
Right, and so many, right, it's called Tithables. There's a wonderful book by, Susan Lesbach. And she wrote a book, I think she could have written it in the 80s or so, but it blew my mind too when I first started my PhD program many years ago. And it was called The Free Women of, I think, Petersburg, but she was talking about the colony of Virginia. And many of those women were not given a choice because, as we know, for the ones who were considered heads of households, and many had to choose to be heads of households because to be married would have been an even more economic burden on the Black man and Black woman who chose to enter into a legal marriage. So some of these women chose to remain single for many reasons. They could have been brought over as slaves or indentured servants and, just never got married, had gotten raped, had kids by their masters, whomever. And so here they are, they're like, yes, I'm no longer enslaved, I'm no longer an indentured servant. And then they realize, I have to pay a tax for myself. I have to pay a tax for my children. I have to pay a tax for my property. And I mean, everything contained in there, chairs, bed, clothing, everything. And so you literally had some women, and I mean, it was really heartbreaking. They are literally deciding, is it easier to be enslaved or free? Because freedom is killing me economically. And so you had some of them entering into contracts to either become servants again, or some were doing work that was akin, very similar to slavery. Because today in the 21st century, we would call it the Black tax. The Black tax was literally killing these women. So often when I have conversations with folk, particularly in my family or sometimes friends, and they'll say, the Black family is just, I don't know what happened, but it's damaged, it's broken. I was like, there was no plan for a Black family anyway. What are you talking about? The plan was to have Black workers. The most radical thing we could do as Black people was to love each other and create family and community in a space that didn't allow for that. And so there was never any nuclear family model that ever existed. And when it did exist, it was a short period of time. And so, I am not saying the people who have decided to be, a man and woman get married and have 2.5 kids. I'm not saying that there's anything bad, good, whatever. It is, right? You love who you love. But at the end of the day, to somehow act as if there was some golden era for Black people's families, history shows that just did not exist in the ways that I think people conjure up these nostalgic memories. It was very short-lived.
Well, I think part of that too is that we whitewash our history to the point where Black people start to see white history as their own.
Right.
And then don't really think about these specific effects that have, on us, that have been very separate for us. Because yes, while white people have been living in their nuclear family units within this country, like you said, our women were being raped, those children were being enslaved, taken away. It was illegal for us to be married. We spiritual marriages, but that didn't hold up and we were still separated. There were always financial either incentives to not be married or punitive measures taken when we were married. And this continued through the 80s, even when we start talking about, food subsidies.
That's right.
And healthcare, that you could, if you were common law with someone, you would have access to certain systems, but once you were married, then you wouldn't have access to like Medicaid or food stamps, regardless of income levels within the Black community. So there've always been financial incentives. It's like, yes, I'm poor and I'm in love, and those two things really shouldn't be a problem. If anything, love should be something to feed you a little bit, but not when the government says we're taking the little bit of help that you do have access to away simply because you're married. So, and so at what point did these taxes stop?
The taxes, so that was colonial America. And as you know, each of the colonies have their own different laws, but for the most part, that kind of tithable, the tithable taxes, or tithables as they were called, continues into the 19th century.
Wow.
And so, because the thing is, it's actually meant for two, quote unquote, two heteronormative, and I know I'm using very modern contemporary language to discuss the past, but it was meant for a man and a woman to be married. And the man is then supposed to pay for his family, right? So it's set up in this way. But when you have slavery, it changes the dynamics in terms of what family and households mean. So even if a Black man and Black woman were free, right? Let's say they both were indentured servants and then they're free. The Black man is already suffering from an anti-Black bias in that society. And so he is not sometimes earning as much as white men. And so it becomes more of a financial burden. And most people are agricultural workers during that time. And so what happens is his wife has to help him work, you know, and that is simply, and that doesn't mean that white women didn't work alongside their husbands, but there was a legal protection for white families in ways that it just wasn't extended to Black families. So it goes on from the colonial period to the 19th century in certain spaces. So literally colonial times to when the US is a country, which is in the 18th century, going into the 19th century. Yeah, so it's you know, the legacy of that is still affecting us, unfortunately.
So there was like an insidious shift that happened, right? So we're talking about how initially, yeah, it's our physical labor, the fruits of our womb, those are the commodities that Black women are producing. But at some point, it got even more insidious, and our actual bodies started to become the source of wealth for people.
Oh, yeah.
So I think one of the most well-known examples of this is Sarah Baartman.
Yeah.
And if you could just talk a little bit about Sarah Baartman, who she was, what happened to her, and of course what happened to her after her death.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Sarah Baartman, or Saartjie Baartman, was South African born. She was from the Khoi people. She was a slave, worked in the home. She enters the historical record as a 17-year-old. Her owner's brother and his business partner from England, they were visiting South Africa, and they are captivated by Sarah Baartman, not because she's the best house worker, not because she's, you know, somehow so exceptional from other enslaved South Africans, but they're captivated because of the size of her behind, her butt. And so her owner sells her to his brother and his business partner. They take her from South Africa. And I used to live there for a few months many years ago. And I always have to tell people, South Africa borders the Indian Ocean. She doesn't know an Atlantic Ocean exists. So they literally take this Khoi woman from the only home that she has ever known, take her away from her family, her fiance, everything that's familiar to her, even the landscape, have her on a boat, take her to the other ocean, and literally parade her around like a circus freak, all because she has a big butt. And so for those who know her by the derogatory name that she was given, the Hottentot Venus, which is also, this kind of play on Hottentot being a very derisive term for Black people, particularly South Africans, and then Venus, right? So how can this ugly Black South African, be like Venus, the goddess of beauty? And so for many of them, in the naming of Black people, they would put these quote unquote ironic names on Black people. So, Hottentot Venus as a misnomer, or Alauda Equiano, who was a slave, but they give him the name of Swedish royalty, right? Because clearly a slave can't become European royalty. So, even the insidious ways that Europeans named Black people was really derogatory. And so she's paraded around because she has a big butt. Piccadilly Square, all of these places, eventually ends up after a few years in France and becomes a ward of the National Museum of Paris under the observation of Georges Cuvier, who was a natural historian or scientist. And he is really trying to figure out whether she is a missing link between a primate, a monkey, an ape, right, or a human being. Like, why does she look so different? What's wrong with her? Unfortunately, she dies at the age of 25. And when Cuvier finally dissects her body, performs an autopsy, guess what he finds? She's just like any other human being. So if that wasn't enough, he then preserves her genitalia, puts it in a bell jar, preserves her brain, puts it in a bell jar, removes her skeleton, it's on display, And she dies in the 19th century. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was around 1813. And her genitalia and her brains were on display in that museum until 1974, when the museum loses those body parts. The museum does not send her skeletal remains back to South Africa until the 21st century. And so what this tells us, and I write about this in my book, what this tells us is Cuvier lays out a template for how folk who are interested in science and medicine are writing about, treating, examining the Black body. And also when we talk about what value means, right? So if you are someone who's owned, there's literally economic value in your physical body and the labor that you can perform, right? Can you pick a crop? Can you clean a house? Can you give birth? Can you breastfeed? I mean, there's value in everything, right? Domestic labor, reproductive labor. But sadly, there's even value attached to your body parts in the medical trade that she couldn't just be, right? Be left alone in death, that there is an economic value in her body parts as a cadaver. And so it literally creates a template or model for how other doctors in the Atlantic world begin to write about, treat about Black bodies, in particular Black women's bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I went to medical school and steatopagia was the goal.
That's right, steatopagia, yeah. That's right.
It's still
a big butt as a disorder, right?
Yeah, and it's like, oh, and it's specific generally to women of like sub-Saharan and South Asian descent. Like, yeah. And so as a woman who went through medical training, of course, there are also two, sorry. A lot of it gets wrapped up into, there's a lot of medical, there's a lot of scientific racism. It's ingrained. I remember in one of my medical forensics classes, we were told, and it was in the textbook, that the preferred position to put Black women in to perform a rape kit. So remember, this is someone is traumatized already, right? And we're going to collect evidence of a crime, and that they should be placed on all fours to perform a rape kit because Black women's vaginas are more posterior and therefore more easily accessed from this position. Or having other medical students who are at this point, in the end of their trainings, and are at this point treating patients independently, come up to you and say, with beliefs like that our vaginas are warmer, or that, the whole we feel less pain thing, being instructed that sutures need to be applied differently because our skin is thicker, like concepts that, this is ongoing in the medical community. And so I feel like with Sarah Bartman, her treatment and then her subsequent dissection, and they did use, like, when they looked at her vulva and they said, oh, look at the size of these vulva, it proves that these women are hypersexual beings. So can we tie that into, the Black woman as an anatomical model and some of the other atrocities that came from that?
It's, I think that's a wonderful kind of, it's like a polar oppositional framing of Black women, right? And Sarki Bartman becomes nothing, not anything of her own doing, but in the kind of Western European imagination, she becomes an object of repulsion. So she's a Hottentot, which, denotes everything that's ugly and wrong and bestial about Black people. And at the same time, whether they want to admit it or not, we're going to put Venus there because there's something that is, for them, attractive about this woman's body, right? Even though she's sitting here being made to act like, literally a circus animal. They are having her, dance and jump like she's a bear or something, like And so for me, this shows what happens in that kind of socialization where you can at the same time be repulsed by someone and then sexually attracted to them, mm-hmm. right? And so there's something in that socialization and that thinking that is, for me, still deeply puzzling. It's disappointing because, as you say, we see it all the time. And she is one of the most famous historical subjects, you know, that allows us to read this, I think, in very complicated and nuanced ways. Medically, I call it the medical superbody in my book. But there is, I think, something about the ways that Black women in particular cannot ever seem to shake the kind of sexualization that happens, even when they're doing mundane things. On social media, just a couple of days ago, you know, I was kind of complaining, like, when does catcalling stop for Black women? When do we age out? And even though this is anecdotal, just bought a house, and my husband and I, we came from Brooklyn. We live in Nebraska now. So, you know, even though I grew up in South Carolina a little bit, I wasn't used to doing yard work. That just was not my ministry, my calling. And so I'm now having to go out there and do this because my husband has some back issues. And so, you know, I was like, no, I got it. I can handle the holes. You know, I can do these things. And it becomes meditative. Literally, I don't know how many times I have had to ask my husband, who suffers from this pain, just to sit out there with me or stand with me. Because unlike any other woman in this neighborhood, I'm probably on this block the only Black woman. I get hunked at, I get catcalled. So I'm bent over, literally deadheading flowers and watering a bush. And I hear beep, beep, hey, Miss Parker, from, you know, the line from Friday. And I'm just like, and I had literally just given a talk that morning. So I'm dressed up in my little outfit, bent over doing this. And so I'm just like, what would make you think that someone who's bent over in some bushes with a hose in her hand, who's ignoring you, in fact, doesn't see you, so you have to honk, you have to do all of this stuff just to catcall me, right? And so those kinds of things where I'm really wondering if I were to have a conversation with the white women in this neighborhood, are you going through that? Are you catcalled sitting on your porch? Do men ride by leering and ogling at you in the same ways that they do Black women? And so there is a very particular way when, you know, Black women travel, oftentimes we're thought to be sex workers. There is nothing wrong with sex work. But when I'm in an airport, and I have a suitcase and I'm just sitting down, I don't need you trying to figure out whether I can give you something. Like, I'm just literally in here like every other airport passenger. You know, if you're at a hotel, there's always this sense of, let me try and proposition and angle her. And so it seems as if we don't age out of the sexualization. And there's no getting around that in this country, Black women are up for people's observation, their gazing, the transference of other people's own predilections for, you know, what they perceive or what they think about Black women in sexual ways, oftentimes in pathological ways. And so it's, you know, it is disheartening. I take so much joy in being a Black woman, but to have to contend with the fictions around what people think my body represents for them can be tiring.
Oh, absolutely. You know, just another small anecdote. Yeah, I was in a hotel in France, and this wasn't one time I was propositioned for sex work, but you know, I'm also from Brooklyn. So I'm doing my best French, like, oh, I'm in Paris. Like, you know, the hood girl in me is like, I got furs. Let's put some furs on. I'll put some pearls on. Like, what time is it? It doesn't matter. I'm in Paris, right?
Right.
So full sequins, furs, like dinner pearls at noon, and I leave my hotel room, and there's another hotel guest in the hallway, and he asked if I can change his sheets for him. And I'm like, do I look like the maid? I'm like, I haven't seen the maid, but if this is how she comes to work, kudos to her.
Yeah, like sequins and pearls. And heels. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So it's a thing. And of course, as you said, no matter where we go, it's like if she's here, she's here for sex.
Yeah. Sex or labor or both. Right. Or sex as labor, you know.
Yeah. And so do you think you can talk about Lucy and Henrietta Lacks and that type of exploitation?
Yeah, you know, so I know maybe for those who are listening in, when she references Lucy, she's talking about the names of the three women that we know. One of the names of the three women that we know, James Marion Sims, experimented on. I often say there were three of about 8 or 9, right? So a little over half a dozen. And unfortunately, we don't know all of their names. So we do know Lucy, Anarcha, Betsy. I think, you know, they unfortunately were not exceptional. They were symbolic of what was happening to Black women who unfortunately got caught in the crosshairs of the development of obstetrics and gynecology as a field. And their accessibility and them being kind of caught up in the kind of experimental trial or phase of obstetrics and gynecology was largely because they represented in the South the most vulnerable group. They were enslaved and they were also women. And so all a white man needed to do was go to their owner and say, hey, you know, she's suffering from XYZ disease, disorder. Let me take on the responsibility so that I can cure her. You know, I'll take on all the costs. I'll house her, I'll feed her. And so it was called, you entered into a retribution contract. It's essentially like a warranty or a leasing agreement, kind of like what we would do for furniture, car, a house, apartment. And so that agreement, whether it's oral or written, essentially meant that the person who would be performing the experiments would not intentionally damage the property.
Intentionally,
right? Because this is a thing that I always tell people, 19th century medicine was all exploratory and experimental, if we really want to be honest, because these are fields that people are trying to figure it out. So half the time doctors are experimenting on themselves, like they're taking all kinds of crazy concoctions. So it's always exploratory. So it doesn't matter if you're white, Black, indigenous, that's just the nature of 19th century medicine. But it becomes complicated when we add in the dimensions of, you know, a world that is decidedly anti-Black. It is decidedly, you know, for the favor of free people. It is decidedly for men. And so here you now have enslaved women whose owners have said, okay, yep, you can do this as long as you fix her, right? I need this woman to work. I need her to be able to create wealth for me. So go ahead and fix her. So the doctors, most of them are not trying to intentionally harm folk. But if you don't know what you're doing and it's all experimental, people are going to become harmed. I mean, that just is the nature of it. So in many ways, they represent the foremothers of someone like Henrietta Lacks, who a lot of us tend to know a bit more about because the case is more recent. It's been turned into a movie, you know, Oprah was behind it. I mean, all of these kinds of things, right? And so what happens though, what is so interesting to me and really sad, Lucy and Anarcha, Betsy and all of those other women, the consent doesn't exist for enslaved people. The consent comes from their owners. In the 20th century with Henrietta Lacks, where these fields have been firmly established, they don't get this woman's consent. And this is the thing, like she wasn't born in the 19th century, she wasn't enslaved. So the doctors who worked on her and experimented on her using her cells, right, or her clinical matter, they literally ignored the fact that she was a free agent in person and did not ask her questions about consent. And they knew in their minds there would be no repercussion. She was essentially illiterate. She was poor. She didn't understand a lot of the medical ethics going around. And they were afraid that they might run her off. So you know what? We'll take advantage of these challenges that this woman has and just use her quote unquote clinical matter as we desire. And then don't even tell her family, right? They have to find out decades later. And so, it's really sad that many of the things that 19th century women went through, here you have a case of Henrietta Lacks going through this in the latter part of the 20th century. It just is sad. And who wins out? All right, the medical industry. We now know Johns Hopkins is one of the premier hospital systems in the world. When we look at COVID-19 cases, people look at reports from the CDC and Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, right? Johns Hopkins is an elite institution. They haven't really suffered in any way. In fact, what's the billionaire who just ran for the presidency on the Democratic ticket? Oh my gosh, Bloomberg. Bloomberg just gave them, I think it was like $1 billion or something. So if they are literally being rewarded for it. And that's the sad thing. Just like, James Marion Sims and the institutions that he was a part of, they've been rewarded for it.
And I know in school, because I'm old enough to remember that we were taught Helen Lane before
wow.
the recognition was given.
Yeah.
I remember in my first biology textbooks being told, that these cells were from someone named Helen Lane.
Wow.
And just like, once again, the whitewashing of it, right? Like cells that are so magical and wonderful must have come from a white woman. Then find out, 15, 20 years later, like, no.
It's Henrietta Lacks.
And there's so many, it wasn't just the harvesting of her cells, because I don't know if you've ever looked at a pathology form nowadays. That little clause is still in there on most forms. Like if you have a procedure and they take a sample for pathology, which is what they're supposed to do, there's a little clause in most of those that when you sign that paper, you're also giving them the right to use it if they find something useful in your cell. And they don't have to report that back to you. They don't have to tell you. But with Henrietta Lacks, the part that for me as a physician, as a woman, as someone who aspires to be a mother one day, was looking at even her course of treatment in the hospital. They kept her separate from her family when it was pretty much certain that she was going to die. And they were performing, radiation and therapies on her. And it seemed like the motive was not to prolong her life in any way that was meaningful for her, but to prolong her in terms of being someone who was producing more of these cells.
Right.
And so to keep her separate from her partner and from her children, because they were sources of infection and that might kill her. And that's absolutely true. But this is not a woman whose life you were even trying to save at this point. You were trying to save the viability of these cells that she's
producing. The cells, yeah.
And so for her not to know that the reason that she couldn't hug her children was someone was experimenting on her, it's truly horrific. And then we even look now, the Vice article that broke with the nurse, Dawn, I can't remember her last name.
Dawn Wooten.
Of course, another Black woman who's like, I'm not staying in the middle of this. Like, nope. I don't care if it costs me my career, my credibility. I don't care if I get death threats. Like, if I see something like this, I must speak up. And that history of forced sterilization for Black and brown women is... The saddest part is that I don't know about you, when I read it, I wasn't surprised.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, not at all. And once again, here we are looking at the most vulnerable population, right? These are women who are not documented. They are being detained, essentially in prisons. And so that means their bodies become state property or property of the federal government. And so what happens when you don't have ownership of your body? You literally have the federal government send someone in who is not even, I just found out that the guy isn't even board certified. And he's literally also taking these women's, their uteri, botching, surgeries, some that should be routine, all in the name of what? It's not even research that he's doing. It's not research. right? It's not some experiment gone wrong. They are literally doing this to these women as a way to punish them, right? How dare you try to sneak into this country and become a citizen, right? How dare you want some humanity? And so you send in someone who is not even qualified to perform these operations, these procedures, these examinations, and people are literally coming out infertile. They're coming out with missing reproductive parts and nothing is being done. And many of them don't speak English, or don't speak English well enough to understand what this doctor and the medical team are doing to them. And so it's not surprising. It is infuriating. And it's just a kind of rehash of what went on. Remember in California in the 1970s with Mexican women, Chicano women, some of whom were undocumented, and they find out later they can't have children. It's just so infuriating. I was born in the early 70s, and here we are, 40 something years later, and this is happening to us, to the same group of women again.
And so, to center us once again.
Yeah.
We look at the whole detention pandemic, because that's another thing too, because it's not just happening here. We're displacing people worldwide for capitalist goals, and people are refugees all over the world in these types of camps. They come to countries looking for a better life, because a lot of the times the countries they land in are the ones that destroyed their homes to begin with, and then they are incarcerated. But here within the United States, 44% of the families kept in detention during our COVID-19 pandemic are from Haiti.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So even though we put, a brown face on it, the truth of the matter is the majority of people sitting in detention are Black. And so we are still experiencing these things at super, we have a lot of Brazilians, and then don't take away from the fact too that there are Black people everywhere.
Oh,
because we tend to paint this picture of like Central and South America, like it's just Honduras, they are killing their indigenous Black people. The Griffina are under attack, and we tend to forget about these things, and it's like so I just wanted to put that reminder out there that 44% of the families in ICE detention are Black. So we have taken this concept of this Black woman being beautiful, but a little disgusting. I think we're like almost in the uncanny valley there for how people see us. But there is no mistake that it seems like everything about a Black woman, from from the way that we speak, the way that we carry ourselves, the clothes that we wear, the music that we produce, the way we move our bodies, everything about us seems to be something that someone manages to make money off of.
Yep.
The problem is that it generally does not tend to be us. When a Black woman wears giant hoop earrings, it's unprofessional, but then, a white designer can put those on a runway and it's avant-garde, and, so can we talk about, we started with the steatopygia, right? Big butts. And how it seems nowadays that, that's the ticket, that's the way to get rich, or to at least, if you're featuring videos, that's the ticket to wealth right now.
It's interesting, because this is the one thing that I often am so happy about. The one thing Black people diasporically have not given up is their appreciation for big butts, right? Like you might say your nose is ugly, your lips are ugly, but try and tell any Black person that a big butt isn't an attractive feature, right? And we just ain't believing you. So in that regard, it really is a retention that colonialism has not been able to dismantle. That is the one thing we appreciate. But as you say, when it's commodified in such a way that it literally becomes cartoonish. And then you hear about, it's not just that, oh, a person has a big butt. My Lord, I've had one, ever since I started to develop. But there's something too, I think, about when the kind of desire for the possession of something that most human beings can't produce based on what is natural for one's body type. So for instance, if we look at someone like Saartjie Baartman or Sarah Baartman and we see the size of her butt, if you go to South Africa and you look at certain ethnic groups, it's pretty normal. And she also was kind of fleshy as well, right? So she had a kind of body type that could carry the poundage. All of a sudden you see people who have really, really, really thin frames, right? And then these a behind that clearly is also that is injected. I don't even think it's been surgically enhanced. It's just like literally these injections that are happening, and it becomes so cartoonish and so freakish in terms of its appearance that it doesn't look natural. It doesn't look like any human being's butt would be that large, right? Because most times when you have a butt that large, you're going to have other parts of your body that are as large. So large thighs, large legs, like it's a large stomach. There's going to be something. So that's the other thing where I'm literally questioning, my Lord, these women are getting injections by people who are not certified to have proximity to something, as you said, that has value. So whether the value is being attached to a love interest, whether the proximity to the value is, having a better career in the arts or performing arts, or just to be thought of as more desirable. And I'm wondering if the desire is for themselves or for someone else, right, that they want to seem attractive to. I am really dismayed at the kind of dangerous ways that people are putting toxins into their bodies by folk who don't have any training at all. And so now, there's death. But then there is something too where you talk about the kind of commodification that happens when Black folk naturally look a certain way, naturally wear clothes to accentuate the thing that culturally has been admired. And all of a sudden you will have folk who are not Black, ain't Afro anything. They are not Afro Latinx, they ain't Blasian. These are just some white folk who decide, oh, if I get a spray tan, if I become at least closer to racially ambiguous, I don't have to have any skills other than a big booty and surgically enhanced breast and wear a waist trainer. My proximity to a certain kind of Blackness then elevates me, not for regular white men. That's the thing. They ain't doing this for white men. They're doing this for Black men, essentially. And it's working. And I'm just like, if y'all don't see this as a manifestation of historical anti-Blackness, where Black women who look the same way or have some of those features are literally denigrated for white women who spend hours literally cultivating darker skin and features that Black women have naturally. And it is being turned into beauty contracts, modeling gigs, marriage to wealthy men, which is a form of protection. And ask me if they have any identifiable skills outside of being attractive and knowing how to market and brand their attractiveness. That's about it. That's literally it.
Yeah, and it's gone down even as far as to the lips, which I'm sure you remember even back when we were kids, having big lips was still something to be ashamed of, that that people made fun of you in the street for it, that, people would pray at night for their lips to get smaller. Mm-hmm. And now you inject your lips with a whole bunch of stuff and you walk down the street and that brings positivity towards you. But the thing is, for an actual Black woman, it does not.
No.
And I think like we've been watching throughout this summer Megan Thee Stallion, right? She became everyone's girlfriend. I know she's mine.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's my girlfriend. And you know, this is a woman with a natural body. You can tell she developed on her own. The thighs definitely match. You know, and you look at the Instagram comments and people will say things like, oh, she's one snack away from, you know, getting fat. I don't even know, like, I don't have, you know, like the denigration of that natural, beautiful form, but because it's not cartoonish, right? It is associated with thickness throughout, because we appreciate thickness. But if it's not, you know, a giant butt attached to a bee waist with tiny chicken legs, then there's a problem. And then we look at someone like this who, in spite of all of that, is still managing to project confidence and beauty and self-possession. And then she's harmed.
Yes.
Publicly.
Like literally harmed. Yeah.
And that becomes just another, you know, opportunity for more criticism. What did she say? What did she do? How did she make someone do this to her? You know, for people, it's appropriate for people to make jokes about it, because once again, as a Black woman, even if you are desired in some way, we still don't have that protection of being female, of being worthy of society's protection. So I mean, and you brought up the skin color changes too. It's like it's not a tan if you paint it on.
I'll never forget this. When I was in college, in undergrad, and my best friend, to this day, it still haunts me. You know, and I went to all Black women's college, and we were all having a conversation, and she said, I've never wanted to be white. And she said, but I've always wanted to be light skinned. And that one, she said, because sometimes from her perspective, she was kind of sharing with us, like, it doesn't matter if a light skinned person is considered conventionally, you know, attractive or ugly, but they're light skinned, and for her, there was inherent beauty in that, right? And so, you know, here I am 20 something years later, and that comment just always stuck with me, that she always felt so ugly, that the only thing she wanted was just to be light skinned, right? For her, it seemed she'd be treated better across the board. And so, you know, in terms of these, particularly these white women who are quote unquote blackening up, they're never blackening up to a dark-skinned person, because that's too much like quote unquote blackface, right? But it's always blackening up just enough where they're like the Lori Harveys or the Beyonce complexions, right? Because they know that Halle Berry complexion or Vanessa Williams, that is a complexion that's racially ambiguous enough for Black and white people, where there always seems to be a descriptor of beautiful, attractive applied to that, because you're not too light, you don't want to be too light, and you don't want to be too dark, you know. But if there's something that can put you in that kind of blurred space, then, you know, there's a benefit to it, right? Because at least somebody can say, oh, I like exotic girls, you know, I like exotic looking women, you know, those kinds of things that we've heard people say before. And so what I'm always thankful of, at least in my life and in the communities where I grew up, and I in no way I'm trying to say that it was all, you know, kind of roses, but there was at least an appreciation from kind of the, you know, the common man, the common woman, the common person, where you could look like Monique and people be like, okay, she cute. You could be, you know, really dark and fly. And in my neighborhood, people call you, okay, there go Coco. And Coco was always like that cute chick, you know, who could garner positive attention. So I was able, thank goodness, to grow up in Black spaces where I saw a diversity of Black people being appreciated, and Black women in particular being appreciated. I really think, and I think this is also where you're getting at, the mainstream commodification of this kind of fake Blackness that becomes cartoonish, that is not rooted in the real reality that we experience in our communities, is the thing that we need to really try to dismantle, right? That's the thing that is unhealthy. That is the thing that is harmful and detrimental, that for a people brought over here as commodities, you're still gonna try and commodify us outside of a quote unquote slave marketplace, but it's now just a regular marketplace. Where one, as you say, can get a tan, get some braids, can get a big booty with some, illegal, fake ass, harmful chemicals that you inject into your body. All of those kinds of things that really it's harmful, I think, in many ways. Physically harmful, it's culturally harmful, it's socially harmful. And we need to really start doing, I think we need to start amplifying even more why this is harmful, and blackening up is really insulting. I don't see it as imitation as the best form of flattery. It's really insulting because it's almost always based on some dehumanizing stereotype.
And so why do you think we're so unprotected in society still, if we're so profitable?
Yeah, I mean, because there's pervasive anti-Blackness. We live in a sexist society. Black women have, as we talked about, that kind of, the super body tropes around Black women, that we are almost always stronger than everybody else. So whether that's emotionally, whether that's physically, we are constantly having to combat that. I think there's a way that Black women are read as hard, hardened in our demeanor, in our interactions. We're read as angry. We're read as more violent than other women. And so when you have these ideas that are ingrained within our community and and outside of our community, who wants to protect that, right? But also this stereotype of the fragile white woman. Most Black women I know don't want to be that either. Because that is rooted in something that's unrealistic, that these people are so fragile, that anything could crack them, could break them. And human beings are more complicated than stereotypes. And so if you're operating with a binary based in fictions around who you are as a Black person and as a woman, there's not going to be protection. So what we've had to do is figure out ways to protect ourselves. Right. And so we figured that out by loving on each other, saying affirming words, creating conversations and discourses where Black women are centered, Black people's experiences are centered, knowing that outside of the comments where, people are like, oh, Megan Thee Stallion's one snack away from being fat. Child, if I could be shaped like Megan Thee Stallion with my middle-aged self, let me have it. Like, let me have at it, right? I'm just looking at the way her knees can bend and she jumps back up. I'm like, just give me that at 48. Like, I'll take it, right? And the extra snacks. So at the end of the day, I think we create affirming ways, whether that's self-care practices. Black women have created the nap ministry. There are all kinds of ways that we have responded to pervasive anti-Blackness and pervasive sexism in our communities. And it's really helped us. And so that's what I would want us to continue, right? If ain't nobody else gonna do it, we create the platforms, we create the healing space for us to use love as the reigning principle for our liberation and protection.
I like that, love as the reigning. So modesty, do you think that modesty is available for Black women? And, considering our level of exposure, like you said, you can be catcalled doing anything, anywhere. Doesn't matter what you're wearing, how you're presenting yourself. So do you believe that modesty is available to us? And can we snatch some for ourselves?
I think if the person wants it, so I think if you want modesty as a form of protection, in the ways that you interact with others and how you present yourself. Sure. The issue is, though, whether one is modest or not, if someone is a predator, if someone is intent on intruding upon your life and disrespecting your person, then modesty or immodesty doesn't help you, right? That's not something you can only control, kind of your own little sphere. But when other people insert themselves and intrude upon that, your modesty doesn't help you and your immodesty doesn't help you. And so for me, it is really about calling it out. When I talked about this is, it was really wonderful and a lot of people commented on it. On one of my social media platforms, I have almost like 5,000 friends or followers, whatever they're called. And one of them is someone I went to high school with, this guy. And when I had the catcalling post, he says, well, I'm guilty because I honked my horn at women. But in his mind, he really saw it as complimentary. And he says, because they wave back and they smile. Now, I know this guy from high school. I know he didn't have intent, like malintent. And so we kind of go back and forth in a very respectful way. And then I said to him, I want you to read the comments of all of the women of every age. I had women who were 70-something years old, little white women who just came out the hospital, literally. And she says, it hasn't stopped for me. Now, it may not be as common with younger women, but even I am still harassed, right? In a particular sexual way. You had all kinds of women. And so I said to him, read the comments. None of us like it. And in fact, the reason you're getting that wave in the smile is because so many of us have been threatened. We've been cussed at. We've had negative interactions. So the best way to protect ourselves is just to be like, okay, thanks. And you keep it moving because you just rather say, okay, thanks, right? Instead of, okay, let me weigh this. Do I want to continue watering my flowers in peace? Or do I possibly get ready for somebody to come out their car, roll up on me, put hands on me, all of those kinds of things. So in that split second decision, we make the choice to, let me just try and protect myself in this way and say thank you and keep it moving. And hopefully the person will just go away. And so I said, I need you to maybe liken this to when well-intentioned white folk listen to our complaints and then they still keep doing things that are anti-Black. I was like, do you not understand how frustrating that is? He said, oh my God, sis, I got it now. He's like, I'll lay off the hunking. I got it, thanks. And people are like, ooh, I was reading this exchange with bated breath because I just wasn't sure and you all handled it so well. And I was like, nah, this is my homie. I know his intention, but I don't think anybody ever just really explained to him in a simplified way without being condescending, hey, bro, think about it from this perspective. And in fact, step back and read what these 20, 30, 40 women have all stated in this thread, that nobody likes it, that it's been ongoing in their lives since they were essentially adolescents, right? And it's not even stopping when you're 70-something years old. You're not even afforded that kind of protection. And so I think it is also incumbent upon us to, in the best ways we know how, and that differs for every person, call out that kind of sexist behavior, right? That call out the predator's behavior without bringing in the person who's been victimized. So if somebody's like, I wonder what Megan Thee Stallion said, I wonder why Tory Lanez felt the need to have a gun and pull it out on a passenger in his car, whether it was Megan Thee Stallion or anybody else. And so that takes it away from Megan just sitting there and being shot. It puts it on Tory Lanez. Dude, you already have a couple of run-ins with the cops and some anger management issues. So let's put it back on you. Why did you feel the need to A, drink and drive, and then B, pull out your weapon on someone who was unarmed, right? So for me, it's about calling out the predator's behavior, because guess what? Rapists are going to rape you regardless of whether you got on, you butt naked with a two-piece or you wearing a nun's habit. A rapist is going to rape. That's what rapists do. That's why they're called rapists. It has nothing to do with the victim. A rapist will just rape because that's what they want to do.
And so I think you've kind of answered this question already, but maybe just to sum it up, how do you think we can reclaim our femininity and take control of the revenue that we produce?
Ooh, I'll take the second one. You reclaim it by, you know what, I think we can reclaim it by speaking out. The wonderful thing that I love about being a Black woman is the ways in which we have been socialized in our Black womanhood, for the most part, is we call things out, and we call things out, particularly when we feel like we are being exploited. If we think about Tarana Burke and Me Too, remember, and everybody was saying, Alyssa Milano, and she was like, no. Over 10 years ago, I created this slogan. Here are the receipts. I have an organization basically called Me Too. What we're not going to do is act as if I wasn't doing this work. And it wasn't even about Alyssa Milano. She didn't go after her. She went after the people who were so willing to embrace Alyssa Milano as a celebrity and a white woman celebrity, who becomes a darling of the leftist media, as opposed to this Black woman who had been putting in the work on the grassroots level. So she's saying, why is it so easy for you all to accept that message from her and not from me, when I've also been using social media and doing this grassroots organizing? And so I think that's a perfect example of the ways that we've been able to say, no. Now, whether people listen or accept that, but at least she was able to say, no, you ain't gonna do that. That's not what you're gonna do. And I'm not gonna allow you to do it on my time. So I think, speaking out, a wonderful way is, for me, the older I've gotten and the more strategic I've gotten in terms of how I move professionally, is I get allies who I know folk will listen to. And I will say, okay, I'm gonna need you to speak out on this. I'm gonna need for you to call this thing out when it happens, right? Everybody doesn't have that, but if you're in that position, it is often good to be able to call those people to task. If you say you're really an ally, then you got to do this work for me, and you have to protect me. So I think calling out and calling in can be beneficial. I think supporting Black women, period, in all of the ways that we are trying to show that we value each other. We are trying to lift up one another. I often say no a lot now because I have a schedule that is just out of this world, crazy busy. But whenever Black women ask me to do things, I typically will say yes, because I think it's important for us to show that we care about issues that affect our lives, and that we aren't doing this just individually, but collectively, we're trying to get all of us free in different ways. So I'm also down for just supporting Black women. I don't care if it's like buying earrings from a Black woman, artist, or sitting on someone's show, on a social media platform, or going to speak for a woman's only group. I just did a panel on colorism for the AKAs. I'm not an AKA, but they asked me to do it. It was one of my Bennett sisters who I went to college with as an undergrad. I'm like, girl, okay, cool. What's your fee? Girl, just take whatever fee you was going, you paid me and give it to some organization, or do something for it, right? I'm in another sorority. But my thing is, am I helping Black women in this moment? I'll say yes, I'll do it for free. So I think those are things that we can do. In terms of reclaiming our femininity, and I, this, I know this, there are myriad identities for us as Black women. So some women want femininity, others don't. You reclaim it, and you do it in a way that you find empowering, that is individual, and be bold in it, be audacious in it, so whatever that might mean for that person, so if it's something that's caught up in the aesthetic, cool, you do that. If it's something with my mom, she loves to garden. That is her bringing beauty. For her, femininity is about beauty, but not necessarily because she has on some new lipstick, right? But it's about, how do I beautify this space that I occupy, right? As a Black person, I'm occupying this space. So how do I bring beauty into that space, into and outside of it? And so I think you can harness that love for our feminine energy in lots of ways, and be bold about it,
Wow. Well, I would like to thank you so much for taking your time and and helping me work through some of these issues. And I think you maybe helped a lot of other people work through it. And, you know, I told you in our email exchange, you talked about colorism. I definitely want to do something on colorism. I would love to have a really in-depth conversation about medical racism specifically, because, you know, just the experience of being a Black woman and having to go to 15 different doctors just to find one who treats you like a human being so you can even get to the point
Yes.
of receiving treatment. Or, as you know, you just moved. When you move to a new place, that's in your mind, like, will I be able to find a physician in this new place?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Like you said, we're not even asking them to do, you know, superhuman things. We're like, can you just treat me like a human being? Can you just treat me with respect? Like, literally, can you just listen to me? That's all. And not be condescending and not be patronizing. Not treat me like I am. I can't even say like a child or an animal, because they give more respect to animals. You know, at least they'll say to a child, well, how are you? It might be a little condescending, but at least you got a fake smile on your face. I'm like, so I can't even liken it to how they treat others. I just know that it is, as you said, it could often feel inhuman. You know, not just inhumane, but it feels almost like I'm not a human being in this interaction. I'm just maybe just an object and not a subject. I'm an object, and that's the thing. Yeah.
So if you would like to, you know, send me your socials, I'd love to put those in the bio so people can follow you. And what is the name of your book?
It is Medical Bondage: Race, Gender, and the Origins of American Gynecology. I would love for folk to get it. It's on Amazon, but if you could go to the University of Georgia website, because what that does in a very political way, it cuts out the middleman, so we don't have to deal with Amazon, but also it shows the press. And I think for my press, they're like, oh, we get it now, that people are interested in stories written by Black women. They're interested in stories about our history, our particular history. They're interested in stories that have been read as male, like the history of medicine. So my book has done, in 3 years, almost 10,000 copies. And, you know, that's not New York Times bestseller numbers at all, but it's an academic press. It's a first book. It helps a professor get tenure. But beyond that, now my press is saying, wait a minute, for the second book, we want to keep you because of X, Y, and Z. And what that means is the average academic book only sells anywhere from 300 to 400 copies. Crazy. So I told them my goal in December is to get to 10,000. So I'm about maybe 2,000 or a little less than 2,000 away. So I've been telling everybody, purchase it, because the political message means this opens the space for these kinds of stories to be told by academic presses.
Oh, I will be buying it, and I will read it, and I will be back in touch with you.
Thank you. Yeah, the response has been really great. So thank you.
And of course, you know, I'm going to recommend it. I am lucky to be a Black woman in medicine who is surrounded by other Black women in medicine.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful network to have, and it's loving and supportive. And like you said, we can use our voices. We have so much power, and that's really what this is proving, is that, like, we are just such powerful entities, regardless. That's right. Even when we have so much that other people can siphon some off, and we still have enough to change worlds. So.
Yeah, that's right.
So once again, I just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And to watching, as I always like to say, keep it moisturized.